You have probably spent hours thinking about the life you want, while avoiding the one action that could actually move you toward it. You make plans, imagine possibilities, research every option, and somehow end the day feeling busy without having changed anything. The strange part is that thinking does not feel like avoidance. It feels intelligent, responsible, and almost productive. You tell yourself you are preparing, but somewhere deep down, you know preparation has quietly become the place where you hide. Because as long as the idea stays inside your head, it can still be perfect, impressive, and full of unlimited potential. The moment you act, the idea enters reality, where it can become awkward, disappointing, judged, or completely different from what you imagined. So your brain offers a safer alternative. Think a little longer, find more information, and wait until everything finally feels clear. But clarity rarely arrives before action. Most of the time, clarity is something you earn by moving and seeing what happens. That is why you can understand your problem perfectly, explain it beautifully, and still repeat the exact same behavior tomorrow. You are not missing information. You may be using information to protect yourself from the emotional cost of beginning. And by the end of this video, I will give you a simple test for separating useful thinking from disguised avoidance. First, think about something you have wanted to start for months, maybe a project, a habit, a business, or a difficult conversation. Now ask yourself how much time you have spent thinking about it, compared with how much time you have spent physically doing it. Most people discover a painful imbalance. Dozens of hours researching, planning, comparing, imagining, and almost no evidence of real movement. This happens because thinking gives you many of the emotional rewards of progress, without requiring you to face the consequences of progress. You can feel ambitious while designing the perfect plan, even if you never perform the first uncomfortable step inside that plan. You can feel creative while imagining a project, without ever producing the ugly version that creativity actually requires. You can feel disciplined while organizing your future, even if your present behavior remains completely unchanged. Your brain is not necessarily trying to ruin your life. It is trying to protect you from uncertainty, embarrassment, and possible regret. Thinking keeps every door open. Acting closes some doors, reveals limitations, and forces you to discover what happens next. That is why choosing can feel more frightening than failing. A choice turns an imaginary future into a specific path. Before choosing, every possibility still exists. After choosing, you must temporarily let the other possibilities disappear. So you keep comparing, searching, and asking whether another option might be slightly better than the one already in front of you. You call it being careful, but endless comparison can become a way of avoiding responsibility for any result at all. If you never fully choose, you never have to discover whether your choice was good, bad, or simply ordinary. Perfectionism works in a similar way. People often describe it as having high standards, but sometimes it is fear wearing expensive clothes. A perfectionist does not only want to do something well, they often want protection from looking inexperienced while learning how to do it. But every meaningful skill begins with visible incompetence. You cannot skip the phase where your taste is better than your ability. Your first attempt will probably fail to match the version in your head, not because you lack talent, but because reality has friction. Reality includes missing skills, limited time, imperfect energy, confusing feedback, and details your imagination never had to solve. Inside your mind, the project works perfectly because your imagination does not need to render every difficult part. The real version exposes the gaps, and those gaps can feel like evidence that maybe you are not as capable as you hoped. So keeping the dream unfinished protects something valuable, the belief that you could have been exceptional if you had truly tried. This is one of the darkest forms of overthinking. You preserve your potential by never testing it against reality. As long as you never fully begin, failure cannot define you, but unfortunately, success cannot find you either. There is another trap. Sometimes you are not thinking about the task itself. You are thinking about how you will feel while doing it. Will it be exhausting? Will you lose motivation? Will people judge you? Will you regret spending time on the wrong thing? Your mind tries to solve every future emotion before allowing your body to take one present action. But you cannot emotionally prepay for an experience. You can only enter it and respond to what actually happens. Many of the problems you are trying to solve do not exist yet. They are predictions generated by a nervous mind demanding certainty. And certainty is an impossible entry requirement. because meaningful action always contains information you cannot access from the starting point. You cannot know whether you will enjoy the project before working on it. You cannot know whether the conversation will go perfectly. You cannot know whether the decision was correct until reality gives you feedback that thinking alone could never produce. This means action is not what happens after you find the answer. Action is often the method used to find the answer. Imagine standing in a dark hallway, refusing to move until you can see the entire building from where you are. The hallway does not become brighter because you wait. You discover it one doorway at a time by moving forward. So how do you know when thinking is useful and when it has become avoidance? Look at what the thinking produces. Useful thinking creates a decision, a next action, a deadline, or a specific question that can actually be answered. Avoidant thinking creates more possibilities, more research, more internal debate, and a growing feeling that you are still not ready. Useful thinking makes the next step smaller. Avoidant thinking makes the entire future feel larger and more complicated. Here is the test. After 10 minutes of thinking, can you name one physical action you will perform next? If the answer is no, you are probably not solving the problem anymore. You are circling it, because circling feels safer than entering. The solution is not to stop thinking. The solution is to place a boundary around thinking so it must eventually produce movement. Give yourself a decision window. 10 minutes for a small decision, 1 day for a medium one, and a clear deadline for larger choices. When the window closes, choose the best option available with the information you currently have, not the information you wish you had. This will feel uncomfortable because you are giving up the fantasy of a decision that contains no uncertainty or possible regret. But mature decisions are not perfect predictions. They are choices you are willing to adjust after reality provides better information. The second rule is to define the smallest action that produces evidence, not the smallest action that merely feels like progress. Watching another tutorial may feel useful, but sending the first message produces evidence about whether anyone is interested. Redesigning your schedule may feel productive, but completing one actual workout tells you what your current body can handle. Planning a business name feels exciting, but offering the service to one real person teaches you something the name never could. Evidence changes your understanding. Preparation without evidence often changes only how prepared you feel. The third rule is to create something deliberately imperfect before you give your mind permission to improve it. Write the bad first paragraph. Record the awkward first version. Send the simple proposal. Make the rough prototype. Your goal is not to be careless. Your goal is to remove perfection from the entrance and bring it back during revision. You cannot improve an invisible project. You cannot edit an empty page. You cannot receive feedback on something that does not exist. An imperfect result gives your brain something solid to work with, instead of another abstract future to simulate. The fourth rule is to separate reversible decisions from irreversible ones, because your mind may be treating everything like a life sentence. Most decisions can be changed, tested, paused, revised, or abandoned after you learn something new. You can try the routine for a week, publish one video, contact one person, spend one afternoon testing the idea. You are not choosing your entire future. You are choosing the next experiment that will give your future more information. This removes the pressure to identify the perfect path and replaces it with a much more useful question: what can I test next? Now choose one thing you have been overthinking and write down the decision you believe you still need to make. Then write what information you genuinely need, what information would simply be comforting, and what action could produce real evidence. You may discover that you already know enough to begin, but beginning would force you to stop hiding behind the search for certainty. Set a short deadline, choose a reversible first move, and make the result small enough that failure would become information, not identity. Then act before your mind builds another courtroom, another research project, or another perfect imaginary version of your future. You do not need to feel fearless. You only need to stop requiring fear to disappear before your body is allowed to move. Courage usually does not feel like confidence. It feels like taking one visible step while your mind continues offering reasons to wait. Overthinking promises protection, but the price of that protection is a life experienced mostly through rehearsal instead of participation. You have probably already imagined enough versions of what could happen. The missing information is waiting inside what actually happens. So think until you can identify the next honest action, then let reality continue the conversation your mind cannot finish alone. Because the reason you think so much but never act is not that you lack intelligence, discipline, or ambition. It is that thinking protects your potential, while action risks revealing the truth. But only action can turn potential into a life. Subscribe if you want practical psychology, without empty motivation, miracle solutions, or advice that sounds good but changes nothing. You do not need one more perfect plan. You need one imperfect piece of evidence that proves you finally entered the arena.